I had always lived alone on my ranch, far from the busy town, where I could escape the world and its troubles. The sun beat down hard on me, day after day, but I didn't mind. There was comfort in the work, kept my mind busy and my hands occupied. The land was my refuge after the loss of my wife and child in that wagon accident years ago. Their deaths were a hole in my chest, an emptiness I couldn't fill, and the ranch became both my sanctuary and my prison. There were days when I could feel the weight of their absence so strongly that it felt like the air around me grew heavy with it. But I didn't share that grief with anyone. I wasn't the kind of man who talked about such things. I preferred solitude. It was easier that way. One scorching afternoon, while I was hauling water from the well, something caught my eye. A streak of blood on the dirt. It was faint, but there was no mistaking it. Blood. Human blood. I felt my heart race in my chest as I dropped the bucket and looked around, my mind racing. My first instinct was to grab my rifle, to protect what little I had left. But then I followed the blood trail, and what I found made my blood run cold. There, slumped against the stone wall of the well, was a woman. Her skin marked with the symbols of the Cherokee tribe. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale from loss of blood. She held her side, where the wound was deep, and her eyes, though clouded with pain, locked onto mine with a silent plea for help. I froze, rifle in hand, my mind swirling with 1,000 thoughts. A Cherokee woman on my land? That could bring nothing but trouble. I was alone here, without family, without the protection of neighbors or the law. The settlers in these parts didn't trust the native tribes, and I couldn't say I blamed them. The wars between our people had torn everything apart. But here she was, her life slipping away, and all I could think of was the choice before me. I could leave her, let her die. It would be the easy choice, the safe one. It was what everyone else would do. But as I looked at her, my heart pulled in a different direction. This woman was more than just a member of a tribe. She was someone in need, someone who might have been my sister or daughter in another life. Her eyes, pleading and desperate, broke through the wall of fear I had built around myself. In that moment, I knew I had a decision to make. Would I help her, knowing the danger it could bring? Or would I turn my back on a life in need, just as I had done so many years ago? As I knelt beside her, I hesitated. My mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, each darker than the last. What if someone found her here? What if they came looking for her? I could already hear the voices of my neighbors echoing in my mind. Kill her, bury her deep, and no one will ever know. It was the way things worked in these parts. The settlers were always on edge, fearing the Cherokee and every other tribe, and I had seen too much to ignore the truth. Helping her could mean my death, but something in her eyes, something in the way she looked at me, made me pause. She wasn't just a fugitive, wasn't just a symbol of the wars that had ravaged this land. She was a person, a woman who had been abandoned by her people, left to die alone. In that moment, I saw a reflection of myself, alone, grieving, desperate for some kind of human connection. The truth was, I was no different from her. Please, she whispered, her voice weak but clear. Help me. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. What was I doing? Was I really about to risk everything for a woman I didn't know? A woman who could be the enemy, or worse, lead to the end of everything I had fought to protect? I glanced at the horizon, hearing the distant sound of hooves, growing closer. Someone was coming, and soon. The choice was no longer mine to make. It was about survival. I helped her to her feet, trying to keep my movements calm despite the panic rising inside me. You need to hide, I said, though my voice barely sounded like my own. I'll help you, but you have to stay quiet. If they come, you can't make a sound. She nodded, her face grim, as though she already knew what was at stake. I led her toward the barn, my mind working quickly. I had a root cellar in the back, hidden beneath the floorboards, the kind of place no one would think to look unless they were searching for something specific. And right now, I needed to be invisible. The sound of horses was louder now, their steady gallop rattling my nerves. I moved quickly, hoping that I could get her to safety in time. Every step I took felt like it was measured against the seconds I had left before they arrived. Once we were inside the cellar, I covered the entrance with a few loose boards, hoping it would be enough to keep her hidden. I wiped the bloodstains from the ground, trying to erase any trace of her presence. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. They would find us. They always did. I returned to the barn, trying to steady my breathing as I listened for the riders. The panic was unbearable now, my mind repeating the same question over and over. What if I had made the wrong choice? The sound of hooves grew closer. I took one last glance at the well, then at the horizon, and prepared myself. This was it. The moment I had to decide whether I would stand by my decision or give it all up for my own survival. The riders arrived faster than I expected. I could hear the pounding of hooves and the creak of saddles as they slowed to a halt outside the barn. I stood by the door, my hand gripping the handle of my rifle, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the weight of my decision pressing down on me. If they found her, it would be over, and I would be no better than the men who had killed my wife and child. The first rider dismounted. I could see the dust clouds swirling around them, blocking their faces, but I recognized the lead man immediately. Captain Rafe Cross, a man with a reputation for cruelty. A man who would think nothing of burning my ranch to the ground and killing me for harboring a Cherokee woman. Wilcox, his voice rang out, sharp and commanding. We're tracking a fugitive, a Cherokee woman. You seen anyone pass through here? I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to look as natural as possible. No, Captain. Ain't seen no one. I could feel his eyes on me, sharp and calculating. He didn't trust me, he never had. His gaze swept over the barn, his eyes narrowing as he looked past me and toward the well. You're sure? He asked, his tone a little too tight. There's blood here. Fresh blood. I swallowed, my throat dry as dust. I couldn't lie to him. Not without it being obvious. Just been fixing that fence out back. Ain't no one been here except for me. The tension in the air thickened. I could see the doubt in his eyes, and I knew it wasn't long before he'd start digging deeper. But before he could say anything more, I heard it. The faintest rustle behind me, the smallest movement. Talia. I took a slow step forward, blocking the entrance to the barn, hoping against hope that she hadn't been heard. If she had, Cross stepped toward me, his boots crunching against the dirt. I'm not a fool, Wilcox. I can smell a lie a mile away. He was close now, so close that I could almost feel the heat of his breath on my neck. Where is she? I stood still, every muscle in my body screaming for me to act, but my feet were frozen in place. The blood was still visible near the well, and I could see the way he was calculating it all, piecing the puzzle together in his mind. Captain, I told you, I said, trying to sound firm. Ain't nobody here but me. But then, just as I thought I might be able to lie my way out of it, I heard the softest whisper, Talia's voice. She's here. I froze. I knew the moment she spoke, there was no going back. My eyes flicked toward the root cellar, and then, as if she had made her decision, Talia stepped from behind the barn, her body trembling, but her eyes locked on Cross with an unflinching strength I hadn't expected. I am Talia, she said, her voice steady despite the weakness in her body. Daughter of the chief. Captain Cross's face went pale. He took a step back, his hand hovering over the grip of his rifle. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not for me, but for her. He had known this moment would come, but he hadn't expected it to be so direct. Talia took a step forward, her eyes piercing through him. I am not your enemy, she said, her voice soft but filled with authority. I come to bring peace. Cross's face twisted in confusion, his hand still resting on his rifle. He looked back at me, his mind reeling, trying to make sense of the situation. You're the one they've been talking about, the one trying to end the war. Talia nodded slowly, and I could see the understanding in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of him. In that moment, I realized she was more than just a fugitive. She was someone who could change everything. Someone who could make the peace that we all so desperately needed. But if Cross and his men had their way, that peace would be destroyed. The air between us was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of the decision hanging over us all. Cross stood there, looking at Talia like he was trying to piece together a puzzle he didn't want to solve. His hand was still near his rifle, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. He wasn't sure how to react. He'd come here expecting a fugitive to be cowering in fear, begging for mercy. Instead, he found a woman who was standing tall, unafraid. "You?" Cross muttered, his voice shaking just a bit. "You're the one who's been trying to negotiate the peace, aren't you?" Talia didn't flinch, her eyes never leaving his. "Yes, I am Talia, daughter of Chief Atoka, and I am not your enemy." Captain Cross's grip on his rifle tightened. His jaw clenched. He glanced back at his men, as if hoping one of them would offer a solution. But none of them moved. They were all watching, waiting, sensing the shift in the power dynamic. "Why did you come here?" Cross finally demanded. "Why show yourself?" Talia took a step closer, her voice steady, though it carried a weight far beyond her years. "Because peace cannot be made in the shadows. It must be offered in the light. I came to speak the truth, Captain. The truth that will end the war." The words hit like a thunderclap. I watched Cross, waiting for his next move. The captain's face was pale, his mind spinning, trying to process what was happening. He was a man of violence, of unquestioning duty, but what Talia was saying couldn't be ignored. The truth of her words gnawed at him, like a secret he didn't want to face. Then something unexpected happened. One of his men, a younger rider who hadn't spoken much, stepped forward. His face was full of doubt, and there was an uncertainty in his eyes that mirrored my own. "Captain, could she be telling the truth?" the young man asked, his voice shaking. "Could this be the peace we've all been waiting for?" Cross's eyes snapped to him, and I saw the fury flare in his gaze. But the younger man stood his ground, his eyes still locked on Talia. The tension in the air thickened, and I could feel the walls closing in. This wasn't just about one woman anymore. This was about the truth that could change everything. "I don't know what to believe anymore," Cross spat, his voice rough with frustration. "I've seen too much bloodshed, too many lives lost. And you expect me to just believe this? That you are a messenger of peace?" Talia didn't flinch. She looked at him with calm certainty, the kind of resolve that made my chest tighten with something I couldn't name. "I don't expect you to believe me," she said quietly. "I expect you to choose. Will you continue the cycle of death, or will you help end it?" The words seemed to hang in the air, and for a long moment, no one spoke. It was as though the world itself had paused, waiting for Cross's decision. The younger man, Bradley, looked between Talia and the captain, his hands trembling. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt that had been growing in me since I first met Talia. The doubt that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to end this war without more bloodshed. Cross shifted his weight, his face taut with the strain of what he was about to do. "I've killed before," he said slowly, his voice low. "I've executed men without trial, burned homes to the ground. But this is different, and I don't know if I can live with what's coming next." Talia's eyes softened as she took another step toward him, and I saw the flicker of something like compassion in her gaze. "You don't have to be the one who ends it, Captain. You just have to help me make sure it doesn't continue." The air was still for a heartbeat, and then Cross did something I never expected. He slowly lowered his hand from his rifle. The tension in his shoulders eased, and he let out a long breath. "I'll help you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The soldiers behind Cross exchanged looks, their confusion palpable. Some seemed relieved, others skeptical, but none of them moved to question their captain's orders. And with that, the first step toward peace had been taken, not with a gun or a battle, but with the slow, painful recognition that things had to change. Talia turned to me, her eyes steady. "We have to go now," she said, her voice filled with a quiet urgency. "There's no more time to waste. I nodded, suddenly aware of the gravity of what we were about to do. I had made a choice when I decided to help her, and now there was no turning back. We had taken the first step, but the road ahead was still uncertain, still fraught with danger. And no matter how much we wanted peace, it wouldn't come easily. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of horses' hooves as the soldiers made their way back to their camp. I stood there for a long moment, watching them disappear into the horizon, my mind still reeling from what had just happened. The decision to help Talia had already begun to unravel everything I had worked so hard to build in my life. But as I turned to look at her, standing beside me, there was a sense of purpose in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice firm. "The peace treaty, it's not just a document. It's a symbol of hope, but it's fragile. It's already been threatened. If we don't act quickly, everything we've worked for will be lost." I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. The war had gone on for far too long, and in that time we had all become blind to the truth. Our hatred for each other was the real enemy. Peace wasn't something we could simply wish for. It had to be fought for every step of the way. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land. The air was still, almost heavy with anticipation. As the last of the soldiers faded from view, I turned to Talia. "What now?" I asked. She looked back at me, her gaze unwavering. "We go to the council. If we're to end this war, we have to get both sides to the table. But it won't be easy. The peace I speak of is one that no one has wanted for a long time. And there are forces at work that will stop at nothing to see it fail." I couldn't help but think of the men like Captain Cross, those who had lived through the violence and bloodshed, who saw the world through a lens of fear and hatred. But I also knew that Talia was right. There was no other path. If we wanted the future to be different, we had to walk through the fire of the present. "I'll help you," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. "Where do we start?" Talia hesitated for a moment, then pointed toward the distant mountains, where the Cherokee chief was rumored to be gathering with other tribal leaders. "We start there, with the people who have the power to change everything. They are the ones who can make the treaty real." But as I looked in the direction she pointed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. A strange noise filled the air, distant, but unmistakable. Hooves, riders, coming fast. "Not again," I muttered, my hand instinctively going to my rifle. But Talia placed a hand on my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "They are not here to hurt us," she said, though her voice was filled with caution. "They are coming for answers, the ones who believe in the peace." I didn't fully understand, but I didn't question her. A moment later, the riders emerged from the shadows, their faces painted, their horses moving in perfect harmony. There were more than a dozen of them, and they came to a stop in front of us. Their leader, an older man with silver streaks in his hair, dismounted slowly, his eyes studying me with an intensity one couldn't quite place. "You are the one who helped her?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I did," I replied, though I felt the tremor of uncertainty deep within me. "But I don't understand why you're here." The old man nodded, as though he had expected this answer. "You have done more than you know. You have chosen a path that will either lead to peace or to destruction. We are here to decide which." I was stunned. "What do you mean?" The leader's eyes shifted to Talia, who stood beside me, silent and watchful. "She speaks of peace, but peace is a fragile thing. It can only be held together by those who understand the weight of it, those who are willing to make sacrifices, to fight not with weapons, but with their hearts." Talia stepped forward, her voice calm yet filled with resolve. "I've already made that choice. I have come to see the truth. If I must pay with my life to end this war, then so be it." The words hit me like a slap. I had never expected her to say something like that. But in that moment, I understood. She had come to terms with the fact that her life wasn't just hers to keep. She had chosen the path of sacrifice because she believed in the greater good. The old man nodded again, his face hardening with understanding. "Then you understand the price," Before I could respond, the young man who had ridden with them stepped forward. "There are those who would stop us, Talia. Men who profit from the war. They will not let the treaty pass without blood." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The truth was finally starting to reveal itself. This wasn't just about the settlers and the tribes. There were forces in motion, men who would kill for power, for wealth. And we were caught in the middle. "We need to move quickly," the old man said. "The council can wait no longer. But the journey will be perilous. We do not know who we can trust." We rode through the night, the moon hanging low in the sky like a silent witness to our journey. The wind howled, kicking up dust and sand, and the chill of the desert night settled over me, making the weight of everything that had happened feel even heavier. Talia rode ahead of me, her eyes fixed on the horizon, her face determined but unreadable. The riders who had joined us moved in silence, their horses steady beneath them, their faces concealed by the shadows of their hoods. I still didn't understand everything. How had we gotten here? A simple act of kindness, of offering a woman a blanket on a cold night, had snowballed into something far beyond anything I could have imagined. Now we were headed to a council to speak to men and women who could change the fate of two nations, if they were willing to listen. But I knew one thing: peace would not come easily. There were those who would fight to the death to keep the war going, men and women who profited from the bloodshed, who had no interest in a treaty. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that we weren't just fighting for peace anymore. We were fighting for survival for all of us. As we neared the base of the mountains, the riders slowed. The leader of the group, the one who had spoken so solemnly about the price of peace, spurred his horse forward and came to a stop beside Talia. "We are close," he said, his voice low but filled with purpose. "The council will be waiting." I felt the air around us shift as we entered the shadow of the mountains. There was something about this place, a quiet, ancient power that seemed to reverberate through the ground. I had never been this far from my ranch before, and the feeling of being surrounded by the wilderness, by something older than any of us, unsettled me. Talia glanced back at me, her eyes meeting mine for a brief moment. "Stay close," she said softly. "The council is not a place for outsiders. You must be prepared for what will come." "What will come?" I asked, my voice filled with uncertainty. "The truth," she replied, her tone steady, though there was something in her voice that gave me pause. "But the truth is dangerous. It can tear apart everything you thought you knew." The words hung in the air as we continued our journey, the sound of hooves the only thing breaking the silence. The closer we got, the more I could feel the tension building inside me, and for the first time since I had met Talia, I realized how little I understood about what was really happening. She was right. The truth could tear everything apart. We reached the council by dawn, the first light of day breaking over the mountains in a pale wash of color. The group dismounted in silence, and the leader motioned for me to follow him. Talia was already ahead, walking with a confidence that seemed beyond her years. As we approached the large gathering, I could see the figures standing in the center of the clearing. They were men and women, some older, some younger, their faces worn and tired, but filled with a strength that made my stomach tighten. They were the leaders of the Cherokee people, the ones who held the fate of their tribes in their hands. Talia stepped forward, her presence commanding as she addressed the council. "I have come to ask for your help," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "We stand on the edge of a choice that will shape the future of our people. The treaty must be signed. It must be honored. But there are forces at work that will stop at nothing to see it fail." I stood back, watching her with a mixture of awe and fear. There was a fire in her eyes that burned bright, a fire that I had never seen before, even in the most hardened of warriors. She wasn't just a woman anymore. She was the hope for a new beginning. One of the elders stepped forward, his face lined with age and wisdom. "And what of the price, Talia?" he asked, his voice heavy. "The price of peace. It has never come without bloodshed. Do you believe that we can avoid it?" Talia's gaze never wavered. "I do," she said softly, but with a conviction that made the air around us shift. "I believe we can avoid it. But only if we choose to. The elder nodded slowly, his eyes meeting mine. And you, white man, he said, his voice like gravel. You stand with her? You have chosen to help her. Do you believe what she speaks is true? I stepped forward, the weight of his gaze on me. I do, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. I've seen what hatred does. I've seen what war does. I've lost enough. I can't stand by and watch it happen again. The elder seemed to study me for a long moment, his gaze piercing and thoughtful. Then you must understand what it means to stand with her, he said quietly. To walk the path she has chosen, to walk the path we must all choose. It will not be easy, and it may cost you more than you are willing to pay. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I truly understood what he meant. But in that moment, something shifted. I wasn't just helping a woman anymore. I was standing alongside her in something far bigger than myself. Something that could either heal or destroy us all. The council was quiet, the air thick with tension. The leaders of the Cherokee tribe, some old and wise, others young and sharp-eyed, watched Talia with a mixture of skepticism and respect. They had lived through countless years of struggle, betrayal, and war. Peace was a foreign concept, one that seemed impossible to grasp after so much blood had been spilled. Talia stood before them, resolute, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was asking. We have a chance, she said, her words cutting through the silence. A real chance to end this war, to bring peace between our people and the settlers. But it won't happen if we continue to hold onto the past. We must move forward, or we will all perish in this endless cycle. One of the elders, an older man with a face lined by years of hardship, stepped forward. His eyes were deep and tired, yet filled with the kind of wisdom that only comes from surviving the worst. Peace has always come at a price, he said slowly, his voice like gravel. You ask for something that has never come without bloodshed. We must be sure this is the path we want to take, and that we understand the cost. Talia's gaze was unwavering, her voice carrying the weight of everything she had sacrificed. I understand the cost. I've seen it. I've lived it. But the price of war, of continuing this madness, is far higher than we can afford to pay any longer. We've lost too much already. The room was still, the weight of her words settling over the council. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. I stood behind her, watching as the elders whispered among themselves. The tension in the air was suffocating. I could feel the pull of history, of centuries of conflict, pushing back against what Talia was trying to do. Finally, the elder who had spoken earlier raised his hand, and the room fell silent once more. He turned his gaze to Talia, then to me. You speak of peace, he said, his voice softer now. But do you understand what it means to stand with her? To stand against the forces that want to keep this war going? It will not be easy, and it will cost you more than you may realize. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. I do understand, I said, meeting the elder's gaze. I've already paid that price. I've seen what this war does. I've seen what it takes from everyone involved. I can't turn away from this now, not when I know it can end. The elder nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. He looked between me and Talia, his eyes sharp with understanding. Then you have chosen your path. And we will help you, he said, his voice firm. But know this, there are forces at work who will stop at nothing to prevent this peace. They will come for you, for both of you, and you will have to fight for this peace every step of the way. Talia nodded, her eyes filled with determination. We're already fighting. This is just the beginning. The elder didn't respond immediately, but his eyes softened, just slightly. So be it. The council will offer its support, but the road ahead will not be without danger. You must be prepared for what is to come. As he spoke, I could feel the weight of his words. The gravity of the situation had shifted. This wasn't just about Talia's mission anymore. It was about something much larger, something that could either heal or destroy everything we had left. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, but there was no turning back. Talia had made her choice and I had made mine. Now, we would face whatever came next together. The process of signing the peace treaty turned out to be much harder than we had anticipated. When we arrived, the atmosphere was tense, and many were still doubtful about the need for peace, especially Captain Cross, who contemptuously stated that peace was a sign of weakness. But Talia stood firm. "Peace is not weakness. We've all lost too much to continue this war," she said. Her words made everyone pause, and in the end, we signed the treaty. When Talia's hand trembled slightly as she signed, I knew this act wasn't just a decision. It was the beginning of a new fight, the fight for a future that still needed to be secured. After the signing, Talia turned to me, her eyes filled with resolve. We had done it, but the road ahead was still long. This was only the first step.